Hello and welcome back to our podcast and YouTube channel. I'm your host, Michelle Robson, and I'm also editor of the website Turning Left for Less. So we've had a bit of a break over the summer where we've had a review of what we've been broadcasting. We used to broadcast every Friday evening at around 6 p.m, but we've now decided that we're actually going to do things differently. I did ask for feedback about whether you wanted longer programmes or perhaps more shorter programmes, and all I got was pretty much half and half. Some wanted some longer programmes, some wanted shorter programmes, so there wasn't really a clear path ahead. Because I travel so much, it was becoming very difficult to do it every single Friday because sometimes on press trips, for example, you really don't get any time to film at all. And whilst trying to keep it topical as well, it was very difficult to do that. So what I'm going to do is that every third Friday of the month, we will publish a longer programme. So on podcast and YouTube, that will be either an in-depth look at a subject or it will be an interview. So we've done quite a few of these in the past before, but now they will be every third Friday of the month. Obviously, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel or sign up for the podcast, then you should get notified. You can also get notified by signing up for the turningleftforless.com emails, which you can either have weekly or daily. So that's going to be the new format. If there are any subjects you'd like us to cover, please do pop a comment below or contact us through the website, which is www.turningleftforless.com. And if you have any comments on this programme, then do let us know as well. We're always happy to look at different subjects or doing things a little bit differently to make it better for you. So now we're going to go into the interview portion of the programme. We're not going to be doing the news segments that we did before because it became out of date very quickly. And as I said, it was quite difficult to keep it up to date when I was travelling. So welcome back to This Week in Travel, as it's now going to be This Month in Travel. And this week we are starting off with Abbie Eaton as our interview subject. And Abbie is a racing driver, so I'm sure she's got lots of stories to share with us about her travelling involved with her work. So thank you so much for joining me, Abbie.
That's no problem. It's my pleasure.
I thought we'd start with talking about your career and how you got into what is probably many people's dream job.
Yeah, I'm very lucky, I know. I don't think I could have a regular job. So really, I kind of got into motorsport through my dad. So my dad's raced anything with an engine that he could get his hands on, really, since he was about 16 years old. And when I was born, I was obviously kind of born into the motorsport world, you know, growing up at circuits from in a pushchair and, you know, seeing really the circuits were a second home to me. And, you know, grew up watching my dad do this amazing thing and, you know, seeing the happiness that driving the cars brought him. It was only a matter of time till I kind of pestered and he got sick of it and eventually got me a go-kart. So I started when I was 10 years old in go-karts, and that kind of was a bit of a transition period for my dad. So my dad had a kind of big sponsorship deal that kind of, as that came to an end, then he was able to actually commit time to help me on this journey. And so that's when I started at 10 in go-karts and then moved on through the ranks, really. And I've been doing it now. This will be at the end of this year, will be the end of my 21st year in motorsport.
So I'll admit I don't know a huge amount about racing. I watched the odd bit of Formula One, but I don't know much about the sort of type of cars and how you would get from when you first started to where you are now, what sort of races you compete in. If you could kind of fill me in a bit on the whole racing scene from your perspective, that would be great.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a niche sport. It's got a fantastic following, very loyal followers, but I think apart from Formula One, kind of that's very, very mainstream, all the other kind of echelons of motorsport is very difficult to know unless you actually know and support someone. So, you know, generally the kind of route into motorsport, and even for, you know, F1 drivers, you'll always start in go-karts. You know, they're not quite the standard that you kind of go to corporate, you know, fun go-kart circuits. They're a little bit higher spec. And, you know, when I was 15, I was, you know, racing in go-karts that were capable of speeds of, you know, 100 mile an hour type thing. So, you know, they were pretty brutal. And actually now if I look back and when I go and watch some of karting and some kids, you know, 10, 11, 12 that are in these karts, I'm like, how did I do that? Like, you're so vulnerable, you know, you're so open to if things go wrong, you know, you haven't got any protection around you and all that kind of stuff. But it is absolutely the best place to learn the foundations of motorsport and of racing and driving a vehicle fast. And that's where Lewis Hamilton, for example, he was picked up when he was karting from McLaren and kind of taken on that route to where he is today. And you generally stay in go-karts for maybe 5 years or so, maybe even in less sometimes, but it's usually kind of around 5 years. And if your kind of route or goal is to Formula One, then generally you'll jump from go-karts into single-seaters, which could be Formula 3, Formula 2, or even less kind of a lower powered if Formula Ford was something to start in. When you watch the Formula One, if you kind of watch it on Sky Sports or something, you'll see the support races. They have Formula 2 and they have Formula 3. And the last couple of years, they also had W Series, which I'll come on to a little bit later. But generally, the route is from go-karts into perhaps single-seaters and on that way. If you enjoyed watching, what's called GT cars or touring cars, that's the kind of stuff you'll see Ferraris, Bentleys, Mercedes, Lamborghini, all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of a bit of a different route. It's crazy, really, that actually the only, I suppose, motorsport that people, the normal kind of folk that aren't really 100% into motorsport, that they get to see easily is either Formula One or it might be MotoGP, and that's because it's on the mainstream channels. But motorsport has got an absolute wealth of different categories and championships that you can race in. And I'm fortunate that growing up in a family that is motorsport through and through, that my dad knew the people, the networks, how it all worked and all that kind of stuff. So really he kind of helped me navigate through certainly the early years. And also funding is such an incredibly huge part of being able to race. The money involved with racing is absolutely monumental, similar to horses, yachts, all that kind of stuff. It's a very easy way to to spend your money, but it's a lot of fun doing it, put it that way. But yeah, started off in go-karts and then we moved into cars when I was 15. So I was actually racing cars on the circuits before I could drive on the road. And, coming to do my driving test, my mum was like, I don't think you're going to pass. I think you're going to go too fast, or, you're going to do something wrong because, I suppose learning on a track, you haven't got to abide by the rules that you have on the road. And I did pass first time. I said, no, Mum, I shall pass first time. Just watch. So I think I had 5 lessons just to, really learn the rules of the road. And then thankfully I passed my test very quickly. So yeah, I moved into cars at age 15, and that was a Citroen Saxo, little Citroen back in the day. And then really kind of moved forward from there into, I suppose, what's known as kind of a saloon car racing series. So from there, it was into a production touring car championship, in which I won. I was very lucky to have a really successful year. We had 15 out of 18 wins, and it was just really, that was my first year in senior racing. So that was against drivers 16 age and above, whereas before that in the Saxo, it was 14 to 17-year-olds. So really my first entry into the big wide world of senior racing was really successful, and went from there on to GT racing, which is where we come back to the big meaty nice cars. I was lucky enough to race in British GT in 2016 with Maserati. Managed to get the support of Maserati, and we went on to finish second in that championship. And motorsport, as I've mentioned, is very dependent on finance and being able to raise the budget. And I'm not from a family that's got a load of money to be able to throw at it. So, even when I was 15, 16, 17, I was spent actually most of my time on the laptop trying to put together proposals and researching businesses and companies to, try and raise the budget to go racing and actually show that, motorsport isn't just Formula One or MotoGP, that there's loads of other championships and loads of other opportunities to tap into a really, really vast, loyal kind of niche audience, I suppose. But actually our audience and our I suppose, demographic is in a really, really high wealth bracket. So, they're a really important and valuable audience that sponsors can tap into. And, thankfully, I was quite successful at the driving part. So I've been able to kind of snowball on and be able to find ways to support my racing and do it for such a long period of time.
So you mentioned about the W Series. Is that women only?
Yes. How did you guess? Yes. So if we fast forward to, God, when was it? It was just before COVID. I'd actually kind of had a couple of years out of racing just due to, not being able to put the budget together. And I was able to do the odd race here and there. I raced with what's called pro-am driving. So you'll have a professional driver and an amateur driver. And basically the pro driver will coach the am driver, help them get faster, and also you share driving duties, and the am driver will basically cover the cost. So I thankfully had some of that on the go, but there was a chance at this really unprecedented series called W Series, which was the world's first female-only single-seater championship, and that was in a Formula 3 car. And the key thing about the championship is that it was free to enter. So you didn't have to spend anything. All, expenses, everything was covered as well. And there was a huge prize fund at the end of it. So, over the 20 drivers, it's $1.5 million was the prize fund. So, it was a very kind of lucrative thing to have dangled in front of you when you haven't got any racing and your life is racing. But obviously, with it being a female-only championship, that is not the norm. Mostly, any other championship is mixed, so you have males and females driving together. And I've always been, through my career, kind of big advocate of just getting on with things. A northern lass, I don't, just if I want something, I'll do it. I'll work hard and graft to get where I want to be. So, to me, segregating myself to race against females only was a little bit of a conflict for me, but I decided to watch the first year of the championship just to see how it was run, how it was organised, if it was a bit of a gimmick or actually it was, put to use as it was intended to kind of create opportunities and promote kind of diversity. And in that first year when I watched it, I thought, actually, yes, they're doing this for the right reason, and I would be interested to look at it the next year. I'd be stupid not to, really, with the earning potential that you can have in the championship. So I said yes to do it the following year, and then COVID hit. So that put a stop on everything. So we basically delayed our season till the year after. And then as we were coming out of COVID, and you and everyone else that's involved in the kind of travel industry knows, it was a lot of navigating problems and a lot of paperwork, filling out and so on. But we were very lucky to be able to start racing again in 2021. And that was supporting Formula One. So we basically went to all the F1 races and flew around the world, really, and to have the opportunity to race with Formula One and on those big stages, and places like Singapore and Texas and so on, is really special to do, to be quite honest, and we were very lucky to do so.
So as a woman in a male-dominated industry, I have some sympathy because I worked in air traffic control for many years, and that's very male-dominated, though it is improving. Have you found it more difficult, do you think, as a woman to integrate the racing world? And how do you feel you can encourage more women to become part of it?
Do you know what? I don't have anything to compare it against. That's the thing. People say, do you get treated differently? And motorsport, whether you're a guy or a girl, is brutal. It's you just look, for example, at Formula One with the second Red Bull seat next to Max. It's just like next. So it is brutal whether you're a guy or a girl. The thing that makes it a lot more difficult is the finance side of things. You can have all the talent in the world, but if someone comes alongside that has not quite as much talent, but they've got double the amount of money, the money will always win. So that's where it's difficult. But, I think perhaps going back to when I was karting, so when I was, 10 to 14 years of age, that's probably the part where you maybe encounter more aggressive driving on circuit against you. young kids, they're getting told by their parents and the mechanics, you can't let the girl beat you and so on. But I actually valued their mentality and behavior towards me because it made me a better driver, it made me more assertive, it made me more aggressive on circuit. And I think as the years went on and the results that I was able to get, were good and successful, then that's when the respect comes. And you CV kind of speaks for yourself. So whether you're male or female, if you've got rubbish results, then you maybe don't get quite as much as respect as to if you're successful in it. Having said that, I think if you look higher through, the higher up you go through the different championships, the media are absolutely obsessed with the fact that there's no female in Formula One still. There have been previously, but yeah, there currently isn't. And there is now the big push to try and get a female to these kind of higher championships. And that's one of the reasons why W Series existed. There's a lot more other opportunities similar to W Series with kind of female specific routes and supports and networks and so on, just to try and basically increase the probability of females entering, to be able to find one that's good enough, has the talent and has the money to be successful. But if you break it down into layman's terms, you've got, let's say, 1,000 guys racing. Out of those 1,000 guys, you might have maybe 3 girls racing. Maybe, no, let's say 5. Let's be generous here. Let's say 5. Out of those 5 girls, maybe only 2 of them are actually any good. And those 2 have to have the money to be able to succeed and get up to where they need to go to. Whereas if you look at the other nearly 1,000 guys, the likelihood and probability that you'll find someone that's good enough and has got the talent and also the network, etc., etc. That's why there are more, males higher up. So one kind of, I suppose, strapline that W Series used was, if you can see it, you can be it. And, just to really create awareness that there are female, racing drivers out there and we can be successful. And it is something that females can do. It's not just a guy sport. Girls can do it as well. And, that's kind of really where we're at the moment with motorsport in general, with equality, inclusivity and all that kind of stuff. And you can see certain drivers, Lewis, Vettel, etc., trying to make motorsport, more accessible and more inclusive for everyone. So we're definitely moving in the right direction, but, it's something that's going to take some time. And I, for one, I'm not the kind of person that really wants things, kind of shoving down people's throats. It's got to be done in a way that, allows it to be accepted. Because if you try and skip parts and you try and do it too much too early, you'll just get a lot of pushback from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's hope it continues to have more women, because I think it's great that it's a sport where women can compete alongside the men, whereas obviously a lot of sports where, because there's a difference in height and strength, you have to have separate women's categories. So I think it's really great with motorsport. You don't need that. Everyone can compete equally. So let's hope maybe people watching this, it might encourage them or their daughters to perhaps get involved.
Yeah, definitely. And, there is still motorsport is extremely physical in certain categories. So you think single seaters, Formula One, Formula Two, that kind of stuff. The G forces are absolutely huge. That's why these Formula One drivers, they do triathlons and they're constantly training. And that's kind of, the higher up you go, the harder it gets. But there are still certain things that can be done to the car and made, for example, power steering. So if we look at Formula One, so Formula One's the top, Formula 2, Formula 3. So Formula 3 hasn't got any power steering, neither does Formula 2. But when you get to Formula 1, you have power steering. So to really have a female that's kind of, proven themselves and given results to be given a chance, well, that's very difficult in Formula 3 and Formula 2 to do that, because there is the element of physicality with power steering. And it's so easy to put power steering in the cars. But for whatever reason, they still don't do that. They've just made a new Formula 2 car that will be coming out, I think, 2024. And they've still not put power steering on it, which is an issue. However, they've made big efforts to make the steering lighter, so it's basically a little bit easier to put the input in. So, there are kind of, I suppose, small steps being made to try and make the cars a little bit more female friendly. For example, little things like the steering wheels. If you have a really wide, thick steering wheel, then your grip strength comes into it. And that's something where your forearm strength comes into it. Whereas if they make it a little bit smaller for perhaps females that have smaller hands, then that makes it equal as well. So, there are things coming into play to make it a little bit more equal for men and women as well. And I think this will help, later down the line, maybe in the next 5 to 7 years, maybe we'll see a female in Formula One.
That's great. So as if it's not exciting enough being a racing driver, you've also worked on the Grand Tour, which of course is the spin-off from Top Gear with most of the original cast. How was that? I gather you did quite a bit of travelling around with the crew. What was it like?
Yeah, it was great fun. That's something I think, again, everyone wants on their CV really, is to be effectively the Stig. It's something that's pretty cool. And I grew up watching Jeremy and James and Richard, when I was a kid. It was, I think most British households on a Sunday night would pop them on the TV. So to get the opportunity to work with them and set the laps at the Ebola-drome, which was their kind of circuit to test the cars on, was really great. And the first year we kind of stuck to that. And then the second year that I was working with them, I did end up going on a few challenges with them. And the thing that really, I suppose, from a production point of view and a travel point of view, that absolutely blew my mind was how much kit they have to transport. Like, apart from anything, the amount of people, I think there's, probably sometimes 60 to like 80, 100 people going on these events. So sometimes they charter a plane to fit us all on because, in terms of cost, that's actually a more cost-effective way to do it. But the amount of kit when we're on just a normal, commercial flight, it's bonkers. And each person that basically has a seat on the flight will have like 3 bags assigned to them or something. And there'll be massive flight cases, full of cameras, database things. Like, it's absolutely crazy. And, I, as kind of one of the, I suppose, presenters, we always kind of turn up a little bit later. Our whole time to get to places is always after the crew, and we'll get there later and there'll still be hundreds and hundreds of bags waiting to be checked in. So it's a massive operation from their point of view logistically to make sure that everything works and works smoothly. And then obviously if you lose some bags, then it's even more of a headache. But we were fairly lucky on most of the trips that certainly I went on, that everything got to where it needed to go, and usually in one piece.
So where did you get to go to with them?
So I think my favourite place that I went with them was, I don't know, there's a couple of places. I think, so I went to Sweden with them. That was probably my most fun episode to film. So that's when we went ice driving, and I got to race Jeremy. He was in a Lamborghini Urus and I was in a Porsche Turbo S. And we basically did some ice driving around this ice track that they made in a shape that only, if you imagine Jeremy Clarkson would design a track in a certain shape, then that's the track that we drove on. It's on YouTube. If no one's seen it, you type in, and I think it's called the ice race or the snow race, something like that. So yeah, that was good fun out there. But in terms of kind of, I suppose a place that actually I wanted to go to for a long time is when we went to Georgia and Azerbaijan. And Georgia is absolutely beautiful, really, really beautiful country. And then we had to do basically a race through Baku, and it was on where the Formula One, the main kind of road, which is the main straight for the Baku Grand Prix. We basically did like a drag race around there. They shut all the roads off, and had to race across town. So I was in an old Renault 5 that was absolutely disgustingly dirty, horrible. I think it cost them 50 quid. I think they spent on it. And Jeremy and James and everyone were in, I think it was a Bentley Continental, nice BMW, what was it, 8 Series. And Jeremy was in an Aston Martin. So yeah, I got the rubbish end of the deal there. But yeah, it was great to be a part of and to experience it for sure.
So sticking with the travelling theme, you obviously travel a lot in your day-to-day racing. Where is your favourite place to travel to? Where do you go to one place a lot? Is there a sort of set circuit? How does it work?
It depends really on what championship you're doing. So, for example, if I was doing a kind of international championship, then we could be traveling, to Singapore, or we travel a little bit in Europe and then go to the States. So it really is all over the place. If you're doing a UK based one, then obviously you'll be in the UK. So in terms of catching flights, you don't need to, unless you're flying up to race in Scotland, then it's easier actually to jump on a flight and head up there. But this year my championship's in Europe. So we fly to and from Europe a lot this year, especially with doing testing and I've been going the last 3 weeks. I think I've been to a different country each week. So sometimes it can get pretty busy. The European flights and the kind of nearer championships are so much easier to manage. It's when we're racing internationally and we've got to catch flights to the States or to Singapore. Or, even was looking to race in Australia for, it was like 2019. They're the ones where it becomes a little bit more I suppose difficult to manage, and you can tell the difference between those that travel often and those that don't, as to those that travel often will be very efficient and have things that they take with them to make their life easier, and those that maybe don't travel so much, they bring quite a lot of stuff, but it's maybe stuff they don't need to, and there are other stuff that make their life easier. I'm only saying that because I'm very lucky to travel so much myself.
So what do you take on a trip that makes it easier for yourself? Is it stuff you take on board the aircraft or stuff you have in your luggage? What types of things?
So my luggage, as you can imagine, is always huge. I always have a massive bag, which has got all my race kit and so on. And it's a special bag. I've got a deal with a kind of luggage company that it's basically meant to have like expensive kit in. So it's got quite nice protection on it and so on. So I'm very lucky from that point of view. I'll always put an air tag in it as well, so that, the last thing you want is for your luggage to go missing. And, sometimes the airline and the airports have no clue where it is. So at least if you've got an air tag, it does kind of give you a little bit of comfort that you'll be able to hopefully find where it is. So I'd say that's a number one for certainly checked in bags. When I'm on the flight itself, I was unlucky enough to break my back racing in 2022. So sitting for a long time gives me a little bit of hassle with my back. So I've basically got like a little, lumbar support pillow that I always take with me, whether that's European or anything. I'll always take this pillow. And it's a really nice memory foam, so it squishes down, doesn't take up that much space. And I'll always put that at the bottom of my back for support. A little trick that I actually only recently saw from someone else, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's such a good idea, is, I always take an iPad to have stuff on to watch and so on, but they, some of the airlines now and the planes have got basically a pocket at the top where they sometimes have safety cards and whatnot in. And if you've got a phone or an iPad that you're watching your film on, obviously the table that you'd usually put it on is low down. So then your head's always pointing down and it aches after a while. But if you've got an iPad with a case on it, you can basically fold the kind of front part back and you can slot it into the hole. So actually it's at eye level. So it's basically like you've got your own TV on the flight, obviously for those that haven't got their own TV. So that's definitely something that has made traveling a little bit nicer for me. And I think one of the main things 100% for flying long haul is just making sure that you're hydrated. And I know it's a pain in the backside when you need to keep going up to nip to the toilet, but certainly for me as a sports person, I need to arrive to my destinations hydrated and ready to go. And just drinking enough water on the plane is super important. And being able to try and switch off, I think, is again sometimes difficult to do. Noise cancelling headphones is an absolute must. You absolutely have to have that, whether that's to try and dull the baby crying or just that kind of constant sound from the plane itself. Noise cancelling headphones are amazing. In terms of going back to kind of the hydration and trying to arrive as fresh as possible, if we're racing, let's use Singapore as an example, or something where the time zone is so different, then in the run up to the flight and when we'll leave, we basically try and get a little bit more on the time zone of where we're going. So whether that's trying to go to bed later and wake up earlier or the other way around or whatever, just so that you try and sneak a few more extra hours for your body clock so that when you arrive, you haven't got quite as much jet lag as you would if you weren't doing that. And how we kind of help do that as well is with melatonin, just to try and kind of, I suppose, give your body the nod of, right, okay, it's time to go to sleep now. This is where we're headed, and I want to arrive there fresh. And exercise is a very, very important part of that as well. If you've got maybe a layover or something like that, then I'll always try and do a little bit of kind of at least walking, or if you go somewhere where there is the ability to kind of, if there is a little gym or something, just get on a bike, or if you've got a longer layover, then go out into the city and just go and try and get moving and get your legs working a little bit more.
And is there anything else you do when you arrive to help you adjust to either sort of the long flight you've just had or getting into the new time zone, so you're kind of in top condition for the race?
Again, exercise, and also just trying to make sure that your body, for example, the hotel, if it has really nice blackout curtains, they're really great, but you need to wake up when the light's there. So just try and if you can, if there's no lights shining in or whatever that's keeping you awake, try and keep the curtains open so your body wakes up when you've got light coming into it. And if not, and you need to have the curtains shut, well, when your alarm goes off, make sure you absolutely get those curtains open and just let the natural light come into you, because it really does wake you up nicely. Same with eye drops. I'll always put eye drops in to try and kind of refresh me, and I'll always try and go and hit the gym in the morning. Again, it doesn't need to be anything heavy. It's nothing. We're not saying go and do, a PB on your squats or your deadlifts or anything like that. It's more just to maybe sit on a bike for a little bit and just try and get your body certainly used to being awake at that time. And if you're an athlete and you've got specific times where your events maybe take place, again, in the week before, try and do some exercise at that time, so your body's natural rhythm is expectant, basically, of being able to exert itself hard at the times you're going to in the new country you're in.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So I've heard the one about sunlight. I do try and, when I'm traveling, I try and get out in the sunlight in the morning as much as I can. But the exercise one, I think, is interesting, in the timing of it as well. At times when your body would be awake, that it kind of helps it realise it's meant to be awake and doing something.
Yeah, and if as well, you are jet lagged and you laid there in the middle of the night thinking, I am wide awake here. If you kind of stay and you just get frustrated more and more, I think that's the worst thing to do. The best thing, if you need to get up, obviously try and help yourself and give yourself extra chances to go to sleep. But if it's absolutely not working, then I would just go and sit in the gym and just sit on a bike for a little bit, just so then at least you're doing something productive, and then you're tiring yourself out, so that hopefully the next night you're already a little bit more tired, and then you start to fall into the natural rhythm of feeling tired when you should. Yeah,
that's another good tip for everyone. I'm sure everyone watching this at some point has been lying there in the middle of the night trying to sleep and wishing they could. So that's another good tip. So
just frustrating that it's exercise.
Yes,
it could be something
you've got to get up and out of your room, but and then it probably wakes you up more. But hopefully you tire yourself enough that you then go back to sleep.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd just end the interview with a bit more on the travel side, and talking about airlines specifically. And I know you're a British Airways Executive Club member. Do you have a particular airline? Not necessarily, it may not be British Airways. Is there a particular airline or something you particularly look for? Do things like points and miles make any difference in your choice of airline? How do you choose these things?
Yeah, I try and stick with the same airline if I can, just to try and build those points up, so that in the future when I do need to grab a flight or something, there might be some upgrades that make the kind of journey a little bit nicer. And a lot of the kind of travel that I'm doing at the moment is self-funded. So as much as I'd love to be flying business to these places, it's not practical or anything to do at the moment. But if there is kind of the longer flights, then I'll try and do, maybe if it's a couple of legs, I'll try and do one leg at least in premium economy or business if I can, and just do it so that maybe when I get to these places, I'm a bit more refreshed. And then on the way back, when I'm already knackered, well, hopefully I should sleep anyway. But yes, lucky enough to be a member of the Executive Club this year. I've really, really enjoyed it, with BA. And I think certainly going into the lounges, it takes the stress off. And knowing, especially with the amount of kit that I have, that, that I've always got a bag that I can check in as well. And obviously fast track is extremely useful, certainly for me, my main airport is Heathrow, and I'm in Milton Keynes. So you have to go around that pesky M25, which is always a bit of a nightmare. So to know that I can get there hassle free and go through fast track and so on is amazing. And the thing that I suppose have to be a little bit more flexible with is what airline I fly with, because sometimes the flight choices are a little bit frustrating. We sometimes have to arrive at really awkward times and the day before, and it's this time so that when you get there you can go and do a track walk around the circuits. And I've got animals that I need to put into certain catteries and kennels and so on. So the more flexibility I can have is the better. But in an ideal world, I'd love to stay with one airline and just collect all the miles. And I think it makes it a little bit more productive in the long run to what are the benefits and advantages I can get.
Absolutely. And a final question about the travelling. So you mentioned Heathrow's your home airport, as it is mine as well. How have you found it travelling now that we've kind of got past the COVID, the paperwork and all that kind of pain that we used to have, but it still, to me, doesn't feel like we're quite where we were before. How are you finding it travelling at the moment?
To be honest, COVID, even though there was all the paperwork, it was a much nicer time to travel.
I agree with you.
At least everyone that was in the airport was probably there for work and for business, and is there to kind of it's a means to an end. It's there for travel to get to an end destination. So yeah, COVID, the kind of hassle was pre the journey, but actually at the airports it was really nice and clean and calm and hassle free. Fast forward into now, obviously it's great that everyone can travel again, and it's nice to see all kids and families able to go on holiday and treat themselves. But I think certainly I can't remember the last flight I went on that left on time. And just recently I was racing at Spain at Valencia at the weekend, and my flight was cancelled. So it was a 9 p.m. flight on the Sunday, and my race was like 11 anyway, so I had a full day to try and waste time. And then I looked at my phone just to see what time it was actually I was due to land. And then it said cancelled. And I thought, oh, great. Well, I've not had any notification for this, but okay. Then I looked to rebook another flight and rebooked that one. And then that one was delayed. And it was also to Gatwick. There was none to Heathrow. So then I got on this flight eventually to Gatwick, and then I had to get a taxi to Heathrow to get my car. And then I got home. So, I'm hoping, and I think it will eventually all calm down and things will certainly kind of ease out again, and everything will hopefully get back on track. But you have to plan for all eventualities at the moment. I'm certainly turning up to the airport a little bit earlier than I usually would, just in case there's any delays or anything goes wrong. But it's the same for me as it is for everyone else. So we're all in this together, and hopefully it will smooth itself out a little bit again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything you said is spot on. I mean, the British Airways on-time performance is sort of in the 50 to 60% range, whereas I think pre-COVID it was more like 70. So, and there just seemed to be far more cancellations. I don't know whether it's the weather or air traffic strikes, or there's so many things going on. But yeah, it's
all of the above.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's not one, then it's the other.
Exactly. And I think what you've said about looking at your phone to see it's cancelled, I think that's good advice to keep checking, because sometimes you don't get notified, particularly if you book through a certain online travel agency. Quite often don't get any notifications, so I tend to look at my bookings quite regularly, it's definitely worth keeping track of, and just being flexible, and as you said, giving yourself that bit of extra time, whether it's a bit of extra time between flights or getting to the airport a bit early. There's things you can do to help yourself, which you are obviously on top of.
Yeah. And as I say, I'm only in that position because I've been lucky enough to travel a lot myself. So, but I think you can't just turn up thinking, right, I've given myself an hour and 45 or an hour and a half, that'll be fine. Like you absolutely can't do that anymore. Hopefully we can get back to it. It'll be a bit more streamlined, but yeah, certainly for now, I think it's just give yourself some extra time and try not to stress. And if you're lucky enough to be, part of the executive club, then go and grab yourself a wine and try and chill out.
That sounds like very good advice. Well, thank you, Abbie, so much for joining me. I've learned a few things about racing, which I didn't know, so it's been great. And thanks for all your tips.
No problem. My pleasure.